So one of the things we kind of had to work through early on was like that weird Christian guilt about when you're discerning God's call in your life. For some reason, we think that like if it's something we want to do, then it can't be from God. I don't know where that comes from, but I know a lot of people. Well, how do I know this is what I want to do, or if this is what God wants me to do? And so,
do you think it's because we rejoice in martyrdom?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it just comes from these weird misconceptions we have. That like God's this cosmic party pooper.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm excited to bring you today's conversation with Nick and Lindsey Cunningham. You might remember Lindsey, she was on episode 4 of the podcast, Confessions of a Pastor's Wife. In today's conversation, she brings her husband, the pastor, with her, and we talk about the new venture that they're starting called Emmaus Church. Emmaus Church is a new church plant in South Carolina, and it's really focusing on this idea of new practices. Nick and Lindsey have been dreaming and praying about this vision for so many years. In our conversation, we talk about what it means to be obedient to God's call in your life, how to operate in faith and not in fear, and how to know when is the right time to move on your vision. I love our conversation. I love their heart. So many wonderful things to pull from this episode. I hope you enjoy this conversation. And if you do enjoy it, the highest compliment you can give is to share this episode with a friend, a family member, maybe somebody that just needs to hear about what God is doing in the world. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Nick and Lindsey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast. I'm excited to be here with our first ever repeat guest. And she brought a friend, Lindsey and Nick Cunningham. How are you guys?
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
Lindsey, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you that remember, Lindsey was on episode number 4, and this is episode 24,
Wow.
Confessions of a Pastor's Wife, which is one of our more downloaded episodes. People love to hear her story, so it's good to have you guys back.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And Nick, you and I go way back, and people heard a little bit of the story in episode number 4. I recommend you go back and check that out. But Nick, why don't you kind of give everybody your background and share the big news about what you guys as a couple are doing now?
Yeah. So we've been in ministry for
At least.
probably like 12 years. Tony and I were on staff at Ginsburg in Ohio together for about we were there together for 5 years, 6 years.
It's like 4.
It was also amazing. It just
Flew by.
flew by. It's hard to keep track of. So we had great experience there. God really stirred in my wife and I's heart to start something new, start something from scratch. And so we moved to South Carolina, served at a local church there for 4 years, kind of relearning the area and connecting with people. And then just this past spring, we stepped out to launch what will be Emmaus Church. Yeah. So
Emmaus Church, which is a new church plant.
A new church plant. Yes. Yes.
And we're going to get into that. Because I have lots of questions about your practices, and I've watched some of your videos, which are excellent, by the way, on your Vimeo channel. And so, but let's start with this. You knew in Ohio that you wanted to plant a church, and you guys you did as a couple, you knew where you wanted to go. I think that there are a lot of people listening right now who are trying to hear God's voice. How did you discern that it was God speaking to you that day? And I happen to know the story at the Mellow Mushroom, right? Mm-hmm. Drawn on a napkin, like every great idea ever started.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you knew it was God and how you knew when to move.
Well, my wife and I both have had a natural love for South Carolina, for the area of Columbia where we're at. And it's where I went to school. My wife's from South Carolina. And so the whole time we were in Ohio, I think we kind of felt this like longing, I guess you'd say, this desire to eventually get back there. So one of the things we kind of had to work through early on was like that weird Christian guilt about when you're discerning God's call in your life. For some reason, we think that like if it's something we want to do, then it can't be from God. I don't know where that comes from, but I know a lot of people. Well, how do I know this is what I want to do, or if this is what God wants me to do? And so,
do you think it's because we rejoice in martyrdom?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes from these weird misconceptions we have, that like God's this cosmic party pooper, right? The last thing God wants is for you to have fun. But we had to work through that because at the same time, the opportunities we had at Ginsburg were so great, and we loved it a lot that we knew if we were gonna step away from that, it had to be for like big reasons, And a lot of that came from just observations about the state that we loved a lot. That just was really it's a state that's just racked with disparity. I mean, in about every layer of society down here, there's just massive disparity. And
but let's back up. You had a moment in the living room one morning while we were praying through this and our next steps, and God gave you this phrase, and that was kind of the turning point for us, where we knew, okay, it's time to go. Yeah. Do you remember what it was?
Oh yeah. I mean, because we were working through this whole what was it? Things here are awesome, but you feel pulled down there, and so this just kind of clarity popped in my head. I think it was God, but it was something along the lines of, I don't feel called to stay, but I'm really afraid to leave. I feel called to go, but I'm afraid to fail. And when that kind of like that coin dropped in the pocket, or whatever, we knew we got to go.
Now, do you guys, quick question, practical, do you guys pray together like that in the morning? Was this corporate marriage prayer?
No, we don't. We've never been the couples devotional type people.
Karen and I pray at night together, but and we pray over each other at night, but we can't get anything going in the morning, which is my favorite time to pray.
Well, I can't keep up with her. She reads 95 books at the same time, and
most of the time in the mornings, we're like one eye open, one eye closed. Don't talk to me till I've had my first cup of coffee anyways, so there's no praying with each other in the morning.
No. Got it. Okay. As you described it, I had this moment of this incredible couple on their knees as the sun came in the living room, and it was this moment of God's voice, but no, it wasn't. Okay, good. Well,
you only speak in grunts in the morning. It's like that's it. That's all you get.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that was I think God gave us this vision for something that could happen in South Carolina that we got really excited about, but then the tension of leaving this community that we also loved a whole bunch in Ohio, that was when that popped in my head. I knew fear is never a reason to stay where you're at, and fear is never a reason to not do something else. And so we knew all right, this is what we got to do. We got to go. And so we did. And I spent 4 years at a local church down here that I had some relationship with, and the 4 years were good. We learned a lot. Had a chance to kind of reestablish ourselves in the area and really prayerfully discern what part of Columbia that we felt would be the best place to start something new. And all of that kind of resolved a little over a year ago. And then it was May, we stepped away from the local church here and started getting things going with Emmaus.
That brings up a really interesting question for me about security, because there are lots of ways to plan a church. There are parachute drops, which is when somebody you just kind of go into the neighborhood that you're going into. Yeah. There's being sent by a bigger church. There's all these things. You guys have completely separated, even from the denomination that you were a part of.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that, which aren't nearly as important as this question, which is, Lindsey, how did you feel about leaving that blanket of security for this huge monster? Because we got to know you a little bit in the last episode, right? You value security, and you're a 1 on the Enneagram. And so all of these feelings as you think, okay, we're going to leave everything that in stable and structure for this new kind of Morpheus church.
Yeah. Originally it was really hard for me. I think I was praying through Jesus, let us stay within the denomination, just because there was security, financially, and accountability if we stayed within the denomination. But then there were just several things that were no, it's time to kind of break away from the denomination and do our own thing. You know, I had this, I don't know, I'm very reluctant and hesitant. He's a 7, so he's the like visionary, the like.
That's the Enneagram language there.
Oh yeah, I know we're in it. We're in it.
Make sure. Explain.
You know, he's like, let's go jump off a plane, and I'm like, but wait, do we have the correct parachute? Are the buckles in place? Do we know they're working? You're like, I want to know all these things.
Who packed it, and what did they have for breakfast?
Exactly. And I don't know. There was a moment where I had definitely had several moments of freaking out, like, you know, we're a family of 5. How are we going to support our family? Whatever. But just seeing the community rally around us. And in fact, this is trying to prove my point of what I'm trying to say, but for Emmaus, since we're like starting from scratch, we needed kids ministry stuff, you know, because you're going to have families coming. They're going to have kids. Where are you going to put these kids? What are you going to give them to play with, or, you know, hold them in a crib or whatever? And so we created a Amazon registry, and we called it Emmaus Family Needs or Baby Needs or something. But really it was to span kids from 0 all the way up to 6th grade. And we had 99 items on there, and they were gone in 24 hours.
Wow.
People had purchased already. So we're like, well, that was just like our needs. Let's go ahead and put our wants on there. And so it ended up being like 170 something items. And I think like 180 something came to our house.
Wow.
And it was so neat because
I bet your UPS guy hates you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But like I was sitting in our front room, and it was filled with boxes, and I'm like, okay, we aren't in control of any of this, but God's got it, you know? And that was kind of like a turning point for me. Like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Nick, what about you? How's the security or the lack of security or the different type of security? I'm not even sure how you would describe it, but how's that felt to you in the transition?
Well, I think I definitely think about it a little differently. We're so good for each other. Like I always said, if I wasn't married to Lindsey, I'd be sleeping under a bridge right now talking to myself. Like she's helped to keep me grounded. But I think it got to the point of where it was like, you know what, even if this fails, like we need to do it. We have to do it. We got to try. And a lot of that came from this fear that I was going to, you know, if I kept like listening to all the reasons why we shouldn't do it, like I was going to eventually be 65 years old looking back going, why didn't you ever try? You know, and that just like haunted me. Like the idea of that, like that's the last thing I wanted. To me, that was worse, like than not having money, you know, for everything. And somebody was just telling me the other day about some interview they saw with like Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was talking about his dad, who always wanted to be an actor, but never did it. Instead, he like sold insurance. And he was awful at selling insurance too. And Jim Carrey said something really profound. He's like, you can fail at something you hate doing. So you might as well, like, if you're going to fail, might as well fail doing something you love, you know, like giving it a shot anyway. And I was like, that was really, really profound. And so that's kind of where it got to. Like all the excuses that we had for not doing it just stopped working, you know, and they weren't enough. And so we still don't know how we're going to make it, tell you the truth.
I think that's a good question for most of our audience. We don't even know the answer. How do church planners who are going completely solo make a paycheck?
I think first of all, you better commit to living really simply.
Yeah.
What is your bare minimum needs, which is something that, you know, Lindsey has really disciplined me on. That sounded funny, but yeah. I mean, right now, thankfully, we have money in the bank that we're able to live off of for a while, and we're fully prepared. You know, if I need to be bivocational, we're all about that. But that's not something.
Explain what does that mean, and what does it mean to raise support?
Yeah.
And because I'm imagining that a lot of people who are listening aren't really familiar. This church planning world is different.
Yeah. So I think you share your vision for what the church is going to be about and how it's going to function with people who know you, who believe in you, and who are willing to invest in it, even if they may never attend it. And so, you know, we've had some people contribute. They did a love offering at the last church we were at, which was, you know, we were grateful for that. And then, you know, we had this little window of time. And so we just started having these informational gatherings in our home for people who are interested. And I think we did like 10 of them or something.
At least.
And we invited those people already to begin contributing to the church, investing in it financially. And people have been, which has been really cool. And so the nice thing is everybody involved is volunteer right now. So nobody's getting paid anything. We're just able to collect money that after the first of the year may need to begin tapping into that for various reasons. But right now it's like we're just trying to build that up as much as we can and continue to kind of gather that core group of folks.
In the American culture, one of the things that's really hard is asking for help. How has asking for help from so many people changed the way you see God?
Yeah. The first thing I thought of was it's like Lindsey used to always give me a hard time about I'm not good at promoting, I guess, self-promotion. I wrote 2 books and I never talked about them, and it always bothered her. She's like, why are you going to write a book and never talk about it? And you're right. There is this weird American pride, I think sometimes. And even when you're talking to people about a book, you almost feel like, hey, do me a favor and read my book.
Right.
I haven't felt an ounce of that when it comes to Emmaus. I believe in this. I believe that it's needed. This type of community is so needed that's just gone. That weird kind of embarrassment, I guess, just isn't there, and I haven't felt it. But you're right, though. I think, we live in a culture that's, we love independence, and strength looks like independence. You don't need anybody. And I think that keeps us a lot of times from asking for help. But I think humility is a good thing.
So has it changed the way you view God?
I think I've always had this view of God. I think for me, it's more about my own insecurities. I think I've struggled with, people have a hard time believing this, but I'm a super insecure person. You can ask my wife that. Mm-hmm. For me, it's more believing in you've got something here worth believing in and worth investing in. I think I'm growing in my confidence of that, and growing in God's confidence in me, I guess, is what I would starting to believe things that other people believed about me a long time ago. You're one of them, Tony.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I do believe a lot in you. And I am with Lindsey that you should have advertised your book more. Lindsey, what about you? How's this process of asking for help changed the way you see God?
I don't know that it's really, I don't know. That's a good question because I haven't really thought on it that much, but I don't know that it's changed it in any way. I've just always been brought up to think that whatever need you have, take it to Him, and by some way or some person or somehow it'll be provided.
You grew up that way.
I did. I grew up, we were a simple family, low income, never was really a ton of money in the bank, but we always had our needs met. And I think that's just how I've always seen it or viewed it,
Some of the challenges, even with your brother and his health when he was younger. I mean, you guys saw miracle after miracle.
Yeah.
Even with that.
Yeah. I've never been one to really, I've always taken what I've known to be true about God at face value. I've never truly doubted. I don't think that He can't provide or that He can't heal or that any of those things. I mean, sure, I have anxiety around some of it and, want to take it into my own hands and try to control the situation. But at the end of the day, it's I don't doubt that He's not going to come through.
Do you think dependence on God for things or is a discipline, or how do you guys view dependence as a practice?
I think in some levels, there's just things that we have different dispositions towards as people. Like for some people, they have a disposition that allows them to trust more. That's one of the things like Lindsey and our relationship is she doesn't really ask a lot of the questions that I ask, about things. She doesn't get stressed out about stuff I get stressed out about, and vice versa. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we're very different that way. And I think people are just some people are going to struggle with dependence more than others, if that makes sense. I don't think it makes anybody better than anybody else. It's just for some folks, it's a little harder than others. I think we both grew up in homes, though, where we kind of learned early on, like, you can't always just have what you want. You know, like, you can't just go buy what you want when you want it. Like, there was this, I think we both grew up embracing more simplicity, I guess you would say, which is great training ground for planning a church, you know?
Amen. Right.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I keep hearing from your guys' conversation over and over again is the need for a church like this. So allow me to be the cynical Christian for just a moment, and say that, especially south of the Mason-Dixon line, you can't turn a corner without hitting a church. Mm-hmm. And so what makes the need for Emmaus so real compared to all of the other churches out there?
You don't want to go first?
No, that's you. That's your tagline.
Oh. Well, it's funny, but I have Lindsey in the back of my head because, Tony, I mean, you know her. Like, talking to her about playing a church for the longest time, she just major eye roll. You know, just like, oh gosh, so we're gonna go find a movie theater and we're gonna, you know, have our music and our lights and just try to be cooler than everybody else. And she just couldn't buy into that, you know. And honestly, I couldn't either. Like, there was the same similar feeling of like, does the world really need another church? And then sometimes just that attitude that church planners can have, you know, of like, all these other churches are so, they're so backwards and messed up, but we got the secret sauce, you know, like, and then the way sometimes they roll into communities is like, this community is so broken and messed up and we're here to fix it. And we both felt this resistance to that the whole time. I think some of this, maybe it's selfish, but has been like birthed out of this desire to kind of have a sort of church where, honestly, where I felt comfortable.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I'm a natural skeptic. And I told you that's one of the ways Lindsey and I are so different. I can't help it. I doubt things all. Like, my initial response to anything is to doubt it, and which is an interesting condition, I guess, when you're a pastor. And I've had lots of questions about things, whether it's the Bible, God, whatever. And I've been in some places, you know, where there's more room for that stuff than others. But for the most part, I've interacted with all these people who have an openness to God and faith, but who feel like that the last thing they're allowed to do is ask questions. And even right now, the environment, a lot of churches, there's like this fervor about certainty, you know, like, you got to be certain, whatever it is, you got to be certain about it. And I think there's a lot of us who are just looking for a little more room to breathe than that. And so that's really kind of like one of the big part of the heart and soul of this church is we want to create a place where it's normal to ask questions, where there's room to breathe. Rachel Held Evans has a line in her book, Searching for Sunday, that just nailed it. She asked the question, imagine if a church was a place where everybody felt safe, but nobody was comfortable. And that like scratches the itch for us big time. So especially in the South, you know, people, and we did the same thing coming down here. You have a lot of assumptions about what Southerners are like. And you get down here and it's a bunch of people trying to fit into communities that they all feel like they're actually outsiders on, because they've got questions. They think they're the only ones asking them. And then you got a lot of people who dismiss themselves from the church because they have a hard time believing God made the world in 1 week.
Sure.
They think that means, well, I can't be a part of the church. It's like, well, no, like, people have been wrestling and asking that question for a long time. Let's ask it together, you know? And, it's really, it's a church for people who, sometimes feel like you're hanging on by a thread, you know, and we're going to be honest about that, I guess. Does that make sense?
It does. It brings up the question, what do you do with that honesty? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that it's out there and we're all, you know, it's kind of like it's out there and we're all just kind of staring at it.
Yep.
You know, I've heard you talk a little bit about be a church of practices.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in context?
Yeah. Well, I think it's about being unified around what you've committed to do. And so I was thinking about this the other day. Like, you go to a lot of church websites and you'll find all these articulated beliefs about, let's just take the Bible this is what we believe about the Bible. I have a hard time believing that every single person in that church would say they agree with every single one of those statements about the Bible. But instead, like, I had to decide, what if we could agree to an approach to the Bible? Like, what if we could agree that we all are going to read, wrestle with, ask questions about the scriptures, and then seek to apply them? Like, what if that's what we were unified around? Not, we believe the Bible is inerrant, infallible, like all those. Does that make sense? All those.
Sure. Yeah.
I think when you're unified around beliefs about things, then I think some people think that all they have to do is agree with those beliefs and they're in. I think when you unify around practices, it's what you do. And then there's room for people to be in community that might disagree. Like, we might disagree on beliefs about the Bible, but what we all have agreed about is what we're going to do with it. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. It brings a question as I think about Lindsey's personality a little bit. It seems to be a little bit more black and white, and it feels like this is a whole lot of gray. And Lindsey, you grew up, as you mentioned, in a home that's full of dependence on God, and it's kind of like really simple. How does wading into all this ambiguity make you feel?
If you would have asked me this question maybe 6 months, no, probably a year ago or more, I would have been like, oh, it's still black and white for me. And I don't know if it's the magical age of 34 now, but I feel like the more life I live, the more gray there is. Even though I think my personality is to tend towards bend towards black and white, the more life experiences, the more people that I get to know, it's gray. And so I'm actually excited about welcoming that. I think my check is going to be within myself is not to rule that person or that person out because they don't believe the same way I do. Does that make sense? More of like it being a practice of what we're talking about coming around as Emmaus Church versus you have to believe this in order to belong. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah. No, it's perfect because I think the natural reaction, especially if you've been in a church for a really long time, is, well, then what's right? you know what I mean? Like that kind of, and I've heard you describe it as kind of a open-handed.
Yeah. Yeah. Our first practice, which is really kind of, in my opinion, the practice that makes makes Emmaus a little unique, something we're calling open-handed conviction. And I always start by talking about conviction first, because conviction is about living life on purpose with intentionality. Our convictions often cause us to like push against appetites and desires and impulses because often what we want to do isn't always the best thing. That's what conviction acknowledges, all of that, that it's not just anything goes. No, like there are things in life that are more life-giving. There are healthier decisions than others, right? And so having conviction is super important if you're going to live life well. But at the same time, we found that like the healthiest way to hold a conviction was with an open hand. Because if you're a growing person, then you've probably changed your mind about big things over the last 5, 10, 15 years, right?
Right.
And if you're going to continue to grow, you're going to have to keep doing that. I don't think anybody hopefully nobody's walking around going, I have got this all figured out. Amen.
Right.
And even in the Gospels, you look at the people who had the hardest time with Jesus, they weren't the people with the questions and the doubts. They were the people who thought they already had the answers. And Jesus didn't fit any of those things, And I think of Peter on the roof in Acts, and God shares with him this crazy vision, letting down a sheet, tells him to get up and eat all these unclean animals that his tradition has been telling him his whole life, you don't eat this stuff. And here's God telling him, get up and eat it. And like Peter tells him no. Like Peter tells God no 3 times out of religious conviction. That's really ironic, And so I think if we are not people who are open to having our minds change, we miss all sorts of opportunities to actually encounter God, to grow in our faith, grow in any direction. So we want to be people who, and I want to say this. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. In my experience, people who ask questions about faith this isn't all the time. Sometimes people like to question their faith to try to like justify something they want to do, but they feel bad about it. You know, it's like, I remember like being a youth pastor, and like a high school boy would come to me and be like, I'm just kind of questioning my faith right now. And the first question I want to ask is, well, how long have you been sleeping with your girlfriend?
Right. Right.
You're not questioning your faith. You just don't want to feel bad about that. Like that's one category. But in my experience, most people who have what you might call a crisis of faith, or even what I often feel like where I'm questioning some things, it's not coming from this desire to get away from conviction. It's actually a desire to be faithful to your conviction. So for a lot of my questions about the Bible actually flow out of what might be the most Christian conviction you can have, which is that God looks like Jesus. Right? I mean, isn't that like the belief?
Yeah.
You had to boil it down to is like, we believe the God behind all of this looks like Jesus, and specifically Jesus on the cross. Like that's the fullness of God, right? So that's your number one conviction. There are some things that all of a sudden become troubling for me, particularly in the Bible. You know, you read through the book of Joshua, and it's like God's telling them to kill everybody. And you're like, sure. Wait a minute. Jesus on the cross, is that telling God to forgive everybody? The people that are crucifying him, he's asking God to forgive them. How do you reconcile that with God and Joshua telling them to kill everybody? So people who start asking questions about the Bible, they're not asking questions to like dismiss it. They're asking questions because my core conviction, it's hard to stay faithful to that when this is there too. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. How do you guys envision Emmaus putting this into practice? Because, I mean, are you talking like traditional Sunday morning, or is this going to be more like a Q&A Sunday morning?
Yeah, I think dialogue has to play a huge part. If an open-handed conviction, dialogue is the like practice, because I think it gives us a chance to hear from other people, and give a chance for people to share their perspectives. And so
are you still going to preach?
Yeah, I think we're kind of toying with some things right now with this Bible study that we have going on. We're just kind of like tinkering with stuff. And what I've realized is and I know you have some interesting opinions on this. It'd be fun to talk about. I think there's still a need for a word. Like, someone's got to give a word to stir some things up, to kind of move some people. But then, there's conversation and dialogue, and testimony. You know, like testimony is one of those things. You know, think about what's changed your mind the most on some big stuff. It's probably getting to know somebody else, and hearing their story, and how maybe you always thought it was like this, but then you met this person and you heard their story and you saw their experience. You're like, wait, maybe it's not like this. You know, maybe it is a little different. And so I think dialogue and witness and testimony is like crucial for this practice, you know? And so I think our worship services will somehow involve that, where there is interaction from the congregation. There's a chance for there to be conversation, but then you even look for opportunities to turn the sermon into, maybe it's like an interview, like a podcast style. You know, you bring people on stage and you talk about it. If that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that there's a ton of value in wrestling with all of that. I see more and more the idea of dinner church or some sort of dialogue, or, I mean, obviously, you know how passionate I am about disciple making. What does that look like in a Sunday morning kind of experience? Mm-hmm. Lindsey, heading into this next season, what's your role in all this? You're the first lady of a church now. Congratulations. So what are you doing? What's it look like for you?
Right now, well, I'm just going to say God has a sense of humor. I have always said, you will never, ever, ever, ever find me in children's ministry.
Right.
It's not my thing. I love my kids. I love my friends' kids. But at the end of the day, like, I need space because I'm with kids all day, you know?
She doesn't like anybody else.
If you're listening and your kids are in the kids ministry, I do love them. But, you know, we had a need. We needed volunteers for the kids ministry. And I told Nick, I was like, listen, I will help out in kids ministry for as long as you need me, and as long as it won't be forever. But never, ever, ever question my love for you again, because I'm about to head in to birth to 2 years old with these kids. Mm-hmm. And I've been there for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah. And no kids have been harmed at all. So.
And I had criers the first Sunday. Like, they would not stop crying. I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, at the same time, I've seen, I'd say over the last couple of years is about you waking up to your influence, though.
Yeah.
I mean, she's one of the most reluctant people I've ever met in my life. And like, it's like she's never considered that she might have influence, you know? And of course, those are the kind of people that usually have the most influence, right? I think she's been waking up to that, you know, and realizing she doesn't have to understand it, but for some reason, people are drawn to her, and she has a way of being able to speak life into people and develop them. And it's really neat because I think she started to notice that when she looks back on her life, you can see evidence of that, you know, is that there are people you've really poured into. So it's been really cool for me to watch her pastor's heart. She has a pastor's heart. Like, already she's connecting like women in the congregation. She's connecting them to each other, and she's playing a role in that, and she's caring about that, and she's noticing it. So it's been really cool to see that wake up in her too.
Well, Lindsey, if it makes you feel any better, our children's ministry person really doesn't like kids either. It's actually why we hired her, because we really believe that the church's job is to disciple parents, not
Amen.
kids.
Yes,
Amen.
for sure.
And so, I would tell you to lean into your dislike for kids
Mm-hmm.
so that those parents can learn how to disciple the next generation. I think it's
Start a
critical.
support group or something.
Okay, so a year from now, so what's the plan for launching this church? I mean, is January? Are you guys?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just be really transparent. The transition happened way faster than we thought it would.
As is often the case.
Yeah. So it was like we didn't really have a whole lot of time to plan. We were just really transparent with the church that we were a part of and said, hey, we're ready to start moving in that direction. And then it just kind of happened really fast. And so we've been sort of scrambling. I mean, we started we didn't start until July publicly.
Okay.
Yeah.
August.
August.
1st of August.
1st of August, I guess. When we start doing those meetings in the home? End of July, early August.
Mm-hmm.
So, we right now are just trying to gather this core. We have a great core launch team that are like on board already, and so we have a Sunday night Bible study that they're coming to, and we're in the school that we're hopefully going to be having worship in too, and so it gives us a chance to kind of learn the space.
Little practice.
Yeah, it's like a soft launch. You know, it's like a big, long, soft launch. And so we're still missing a few key people on the bus. We need a worship leader. So if anybody's listening and you like to lead worship.
And you like South Carolina.
Yeah, it's nice and warm down here. And sweet tea's everywhere. It just flows all over the place. Look me up.
Okay, so we'll link to Emmaus in the show notes. And if you're a worship leader and you want to be in South Carolina where the sweet tea flows like honey and it's warm 11 months out of the year, we will definitely get you connected to that. So let me ask you this. And how do we know a year from the official launch of Emmaus that it's been a successful launch?
Wow.
Well, I think I want to speak to that because it's something I've been wrestling with. And Tony, maybe you can understand this too. Like the 10 years that we've been in ministry together, all we've ever known is mega church. We came from a church that had 5,000 members, and we went to another church that had 2,500 members. And so how do mega churches measure success? By metrics, by how many people's rear ends are in the seats, right? So the first year for us, we were talking about this the other night, like what's going to be our hardest struggle is not logistics. It's not even finding a worship leader or all those key people. It's going to be wrestling our mega church demons. And what I mean by that is measuring what success looks like. And not using our normal metric system of the number of people, but actually, are we going deep? Like, are we allowing these people, whether it's 50 or 100, to come with their questions and their doubts and their skepticism and everything in between, and allowing them to be fully present and to be fully themselves and not trying to box them in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think success, that's what it's going to look like for us.
Mm-hmm.
Not numbers, but how deep did we go with the people that showed up, and were we faithful with those that were there?
Yeah. I mean, we've already seen some really cool things happen. I mean, our first Bible study, I had a girl tell me that was the first time she ever opened a Bible, and she goes, and my fingers didn't burn off, you know, which I thought was great. I think I would seeing people really enter into authentic relationships. That's huge. Developing a sense of trust from the community. We're in a community where I think there is a lot of distrust.
Wow.
To be honest, distrust towards white people, and I think distrust towards the church. And so if we can somehow develop just a better relationship with the community in the school, that would be a huge success.
Yeah.
I'd love for us to be sustainable in a year where, you know, we don't want to be worried about numbers, but I'd like to have enough people where we could support a small staff, you know, and then that would be great, you know, where we're able to hire a few folks.
Mm-hmm.
So
it could all be game changers, right? I know it took us 5 years before we stopped counting attendance as a metrics of success.
yeah, you have to.
Yeah. And the reality is, you know, we weren't able to create the culture from scratch. So we were kind of turning a ship.
Yeah.
It's a little different than a church plant, but certainly church planting comes with its own set of stuff. What are you most looking forward to about this next season of ministry, individually and as a couple?
You know, I think individually for me, this is something I've just become aware of, so I'm probably not going to say it right, but actually finding my voice, like my voice, when it comes to preaching, communicating, whatever. I've been in some awesome places. I've learned a lot, and I feel like I've been poured into and developed, but I've also been in places where I feel like I've kind of had to like speak or say and kind of like a certain, what's the right word? You kind of have to hem it in a little bit, you know, like you have to translate yourself into that context because it's somebody else's thing. It's somebody else's pulpit, somebody else's church, which is great. And I think I'm really eager to see what happens when like I don't have to do that anymore. And I can just start.
I'm kind of excited about that. That got me a little excited. I mean, because you're one of my favorite preachers, Nick Cunningham. I'm telling you, I'm excited to hear what happens when you go Unchained.
But I don't even know who that is yet, you know, so I'm trying to figure that out. But I think that's going to be fun.
Lindsey, what about you? What are you most looking forward to individually?
You know, one of the things that we kind of heard over and over from just the people that expressed interest in wanting to be a part of the church, attend the church, is just all the ways that the church has hurt them, which it's a reality, you know, like we've been hurt by the church. We've done the hurt, you know, the hurt's been on the end of, you know, dishing out the hurt, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And so I think just seeing people find a place that is a refuge for them. Oftentimes, I think church is more of a place to show up and a place where you have to perform in order to fit in, or you have to be this certain person. And I don't think that we're allowed to actually show our true selves or our true colors when it comes to church. And so just being able to offer a place of refuge for people excites me.
Mm-hmm. And what about for you guys as a couple?
It's definitely going to stretch us.
Yeah.
I mean, already, you know, like we said, the transition was very abrupt for us. And so he went from being gone Monday through Friday in the office, because pastors actually have office hours, believe it or not. And because most people think they don't, you know.
It's just Sunday morning.
You know, from Monday through Friday to, he's home every single day.
Whew, that's a lot.
That's a lot. Like, that was a big transition and a big change for us. And it still is. We're trying to still figure out our new normal. But it's definitely stretched us. I mean, I honestly think, though, that we're really great for one another, especially as it pertains to this. Like, I give it to him. He gives it right back to me. Like, I'm not just this submissive person who will take it. Like, he's got his hands full, to be quite honest.
Right back at you. No, but I think, to say, I've always felt like the core of our marriage has been this, like this fondness for each other, and like what's the better word? Like I'm impressed by her, I admire her. Like I actually admire, like I look at the way every morning she's in her blue chair, spending time with God, and just the discipline. The discipline. But so I think that's been like, so what's fun is I think this season is only, for me, it's only like really worked to encourage that, or like even fuel that more. I've watched her lean into hard things and do things she's never done before, and actually have conversations with people where I can tell she's super uncomfortable, but she's doing it anyway. So anything, it's just growing my like admiration for her. But I think as a family, we've already seen. Somebody said something to me early on that just kind of ticked me off. And there's like, you got to think about your kids, Nick. Like, how could you got 3 kids and you're going to do that? Kind of like this, I wasn't being a good parent, I remember saying to them, I was like, providing for your kids is about way more than just making sure all their material needs are met. Like providing for my kids is about inviting them into something bigger than them, and giving them a real Jesus worldview. And it's happening. Like our kids are young, but they are all in. And it's been really neat to see how excited they've gotten and how they've owned it. They're praying all the time. And people are like, well, they're pastors' kids because we're forcing it down their throat. We're not. Like there's just a sort of openness to it. And it's been really cool to see that. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. Okay. So 2 questions left. The first one is if somebody wants to follow this journey and support Emmaus, where can they go to find you guys? Where are you guys at on all the interwebs?
Yeah, we are on Facebook and Instagram. Our, I guess your handle, is what you call it, your handle.
Yes.
You're the social media guy, Tony. Emmaus Church
_SC.
South Carolina. So
got it.
You can find us there. We're in the process of getting a website off the ground. But we are on Facebook and Instagram right now. There's links to a push pay if you do want to give, and we'd love for you to give, especially if you're loaded. Just kidding, not really, but yeah. So
yeah, if God moves you that way, it's a opportunity.
A couple things to do with money. Yeah, that'd be the primary way of getting in touch with us is through Instagram or Facebook right now.
Are you going to change your Instagram to Confessions of Church Planner's Wife? Nah. Stick with what's working.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, and probably the most important, is that there's probably going to be lots of people who are listening to this podcast. How can they pray for you and for Emmaus?
Yeah. 2 things that pop in my head. The things that give me the most anxiety right now. Number 1 is we are missing a few key players, on the bus. And I feel like God's going to bring those people, to us. And so I just pray for that we do find the right people. And then the other thing is just favor in this community, in the actual community that we're in. I was there this morning at a PTO. We did a book drive, and I was there collecting books and just interacting with parents and stuff. And I just sense this, like, there is a little bit of a distrust towards the church, and I would love for there to be a good relationship there, just for favor.
I think for me, selfishly, just pray for us. Just that, anytime you're going out and doing something that's needed or necessary, you're always going to come up against opposition from the evil one because he doesn't want you to do these things. So just pray for, one, just protection around our family and especially around the people who are all in and they want to be a part of this. While we might be used to some of the opposition, this might be new for them, and just that we don't grow weary in doing good, because that's very easy, especially in church planning, because it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to think about. And some days you're like, is this even worth it? Yeah, I said it, and so just not growing weary.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think we can certainly pray for all of those things, and we're rooting for you and we're pulling for you. And I know that so many people here in Ohio and around the United States care deeply for what God's going to do in and through you guys.
We love you, Dayton. You guys rock.
So thank you so much. And hey, let's do this again. How about that? And we can hear about how awesome, and tell everybody what God's doing out of Emmaus.
Well, I love it. Thanks for having us, Tony.
Wasn't that an incredible conversation with Nick and Lindsey? I love the way they tell the story about how they waited and waited for God's timing to be perfect for this dream to come to fruition. I think it's a lesson for all of us. If you could do me a favor and go and tell Nick and Lindsey how much you appreciated hearing them on the Reclamation podcast. Also, please join me in praying for them and the movement that God is going to do in and through them at Emmaus Church. Follow them on all the social media so you can stay up to date. And from me to you, thank you so much for sharing and being part of this journey. I would love to hear your feedback. You can always send me that feedback over the social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, and on my website at TWMILT, at TWMilt. Until next time, see you guys real soon.